welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 281, and today's date is February 4th, 2014, and the title of this episode is China is Now Challenging the Western Oil Conglomerates. And we understand that China is setting itself up to become the reserve currency of the world, and they are now pushing their agenda forward, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in this report. But let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that unemployment is horrific across the Eurozone. Things are not getting better. I do see in the corporate media they're all saying that, oh yes, there is a recovery. It looks like manufacturing could be up, unemployment could be going down. But in reality, it's completely false. It is just that propaganda. Spain right now, their unemployment rate continually rises. It has increased in January by 2.5%, and there are now more than 4.8 million people out of work. And we are seeing this run its course all throughout Europe. Every single country, things are not getting better. It is actually getting worse. And we can tell it's getting worse by all the data that is coming out of all these areas. And of course, if you listen to the corporate media, they like to spin this information. They like to take bits and pieces, and they tell you that things are getting better. But again, it is a complete illusion. They told us that things were getting better back in the summer and the fall of 2013. And here we are. Greece is getting another bailout. Cyprus is getting another bailout. Unemployment continually goes up. We are seeing protests. We are seeing rioting. France, they told us they're coming out of a recovery. Spain, they said the same thing. But guess what? They are going nowhere. The only thing they've been doing is manipulating data, using Social Security reserves in Spain to pay off certain things. France has been raising taxes. They raise taxes to like 75% for those who are very wealthy, and of course those are going to come down to the middle class and down to the poor, because this is always how it happens, because they do not have the revenue to pay for everything. Now here in the U.S., we are seeing the same exact thing, but again, all eyes on the stock market. And if you look beyond the stock market, you can see what's actually going on. Now, Gannett, their fourth quarter profit was down by 12%, and this is the company that is the media company that publishes like USA Today, and they own dozens of other type of newspapers and television stations. And they earned about $90.7 million, and the quarter ended of December 29th, and that was down from $103.1 million. So their profits are falling because what they're saying is that they are not getting the same companies advertising in the media. And of course, they're not advertising because their sales are not up. So if their sales aren't up, they don't have the money to advertise. And this is what we are seeing all over the place. And again, retail sales usually advertise on TV and in newspapers. If they are closing stores, laying off people because they are not bringing in the revenue, it makes it very tough for them to pay for these gigantic ad spots. And what we're seeing right now is that Radio Shack is closing 500 stores. They closed 500 stores last year, and they're closing 500 more this year. So what we are seeing is that retail is not thriving. It's not getting better. People do not have the disposable income to pay for the goods. That's what it comes down to. And if we look at the retail chain stores year-to-year percentage, it is right now at 0%. If we look back to 2008, it was around -2%. Then it rose to about 5.2% by 2010, and then we had a steady decline from that point on to now back to 0%. Now again, we have to remember, and we have to use common sense. If unemployment was much higher back in 2010, and now we're down to 6.7%, wouldn't you think that people have more income now to spend in retail, and retail sales would be going up? Why are they going down? Well, because the numbers are manipulated. It's a complete illusion, and people do not have the disposable income. And this is what we are seeing right now. Now, factory orders dropped most in 5 months. Factory orders dropped around 1.5% in December, their biggest fall since July. And U.S. December durables orders dropped 4.2%. We can see what is happening. Things are not going well. Factory orders are dropping. People are not buying. And guess what's happening? Inventory surged to new record high and at the fastest pace in 6 months. Again, we have to remember the automobile manufacturers have been channel stuffing these dealerships. I reported this on this yesterday, and they have more than 114 days worth of inventory. Yes, manufacturing is producing, but they're reaching the point where they can't give any more inventory to dealerships. Retail stores are not taking orders anymore because they just can't move the stuff. So factories are starting to seize up right now, and this is what we see happening. And we have to remember, things are an illusion. Just remember this. Every time you hear these government officials and their ridiculous stats that come out, always think the opposite and look past that. And we're looking at things that are happening now all over the country. And we look at Disney right now, Disney Interactive, they're laying off hundreds of people. We don't have the exact number, but they've already announced it. They're going to have layoffs. Intern Paper, Cortland, they're laying off 500 people next week. U.S. Steel is laying off 175 people. The Kellogg Company plans to shut a plant in Charlotte. They're laying off 195 people, and that's what's happening. Now, we know that Radio Shack is closing stores. They closed 500 last year. They're closing 500 more this year. We understand Macy's, JCPenney's, Aeropostale, they're closing stores because the Christmas holiday season was horrific. Actually, the entire year was going nowhere because people do not have the money to spend on anything. And that's really what it's all about. And if we really look at what's happening, the retail market is pretty much falling apart. The Jones Group, they're closing 170 stores. Family Dollar stores are closing 80. Build-A-Bear is closing around 63. Loehmann's is closing around 39. Barnes & Noble, they're closing another 20 stores. Target, they're closing 8 stores. So we can see things are not working out. People do not have the money. Unemployment is around 30 to 37%, depending on the calculation you use. If you use shadow stats, it's closer to 30%. If you use other people who've been calculating, they're saying it's around 37%. But what we know is it is high, and we understand that Dell has is laying off 15,000 people. We know 1.3 million people have dropped off the extended unemployment benefits, and we're going to see the unemployment rate come down, and we know this is going to be completely false. It's going to be an illusion. People are going to think that we're in a recovery, but this is what they want. They want everyone to believe this because guess what? The market is going up. Put your money in there. Yeah, it came down a little bit. It's holding steady today because they can really, right after the market closed, the S&P has dropped another 6 points or so, and we're going to have to see what happens tomorrow. And we're going to see this up and down type of market right now because I believe that we hit the top and we are on our way down at this point. But I don't think it's going to come down tomorrow. I think we have a little bit more time. And I think they're getting and preparing this event to distract everyone from the economy and what is really going on here. Now, the Perth Mint and the U.S. Mint see higher January gold sales. The Australian Perth Mint, which refines most of the bullion from the world's second biggest producer, joined the U.S. Mint in reporting gold demand climbed in January. Sales of gold coins by the U.S. Mint rose 63% in January to the highest since April. And again, we see gold being pushed down today. They pushed the market up as best they could. It pretty much went nowhere, actually. And we might even see a decline in the markets tomorrow. Now, we understand that China is positioning themselves to become the reserve currency. And what have they done? Well, they've been hoarding gold. They've been buying gold left and right all over the place, and they do not sell it. They keep it. They're telling their people to purchase gold. Yes, this is the people in China. They want everyone to own gold. And if you compare it to the United States, where they say gold is a relic, do not own it. It's better if you have a piece of paper that's more valuable. So China right now is purchasing gold left and right. And they are making deals all around the world. They're making bilateral trade deals with all countries: Australia, UK, Iran, Russia, India, North Korea, you name it. They are making this, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they're making deals. They also have a clearinghouse in Africa. Kenya is now the Chinese clearinghouse, and we see a couple of nations in Africa that are building up their reserves in the yuan and dumping the US dollar. China has also come out and said they do not see a benefit in holding US dollars, and they do not see the benefit of holding treasuries. So they are not purchasing as many treasuries as they used to, and you're going to see them start to get rid of them. Russia also said they see the dollar dying around 2017, so they're telling their people, you know what, it might not be worth holding the dollar at this point. We also understand that China is setting up the Singapore Exchange and the Hong Kong Exchange. Their aim is to combine their forces in rolling out more financial products denominated in the Chinese yuan, and we can see how this is setting up. And this is going to compete against the U.S. stock market and the UK market, and they're also having the Chinese yuan pegged to oil, and it's going to be the petro yuan. So you can see what is happening right now. They have been positioning themselves in Africa, helping the African nations mine for natural resources and to set up an infrastructure to harvest the oil from these countries. They are in the Middle East, they are in Africa, they are in North Korea, they are in Afghanistan, helping them with their natural resources. So they're using US dollars to spread around all these nations to build their infrastructure. And what they are doing right now, they are challenging the West and the oil conglomerates on pricing oil, and this is what we are seeing right now. The Shanghai International Energy Trade Center began operations planning to introduce the nation's crude oil futures and attract foreign funds to invest in domestic futures trading, but it remains to be seen whether it can break the pricing monopoly by foreign countries, pretty much the West. And this should open a window for China to control partial price fixing for crude oil futures trade. Oil price fixing refers to the crude prices for long-term trading contracts in the international crude oil market, which exerts incredible power over the crude oil and chemical industries. Usually, crude oil prices in one or several crude oil markets are used as the base price in addition to added premiums or discounts. So they are definitely making their move at this time. We can see what is happening, and this is a threat to the US dollar. And if we take a look at what is happening, and I've mentioned this before, but the US has the petrodollar in the Middle East, in Africa, and they are using force to make all these countries use the petrodollar. They have been trying to get into Syria to remove Assad so they can implement the US dollar as a reserve currency in there and sell their natural resources. They are making a play for Iran right now with these peace talks, so the IMF and the central bankers can infiltrate their banks and put their oil on the US dollar. And this is what their real agenda is in Iran. So we can see what's happening. Now, China is on the other side in, let's say, Lebanon, in Libya, in Sudan. They are funding, using U.S. dollars, their oil infrastructure, and the people of these countries are fighting back, and they want their country back. And of course, the U.S. is calling them Al-Qaeda, but they are the people of these countries who want their countries back, because Lebanon, Libya, Yemen, Iraq all have puppet regimes controlled by the central bankers to price all of their oil on the natural resources. And this is what's happening right now. And this is why you heard warnings that they will fire on any tanker that comes into port and doesn't use the government oil which is on the U.S. dollar. If they use the rebels' oil, they will sink the oil tanker because they lose out if that happens. Now, as the people continually move forward and push the central bankers out, what's going to happen is that the US dollar is no longer needed around the world to pay for these natural resources. And if you don't need the dollar, what happens? Countries start dumping it and they send it back to the US. And this is what the central bankers, US government, are trying to prevent. And this is why we are seeing wars, drone attacks, all of this happen at this time, because China is making their move. It is a direct threat to the US dollar. And this is why we are seeing them build up the propaganda in Syria right now, because they need to get the war started to cover up what eventually is going to happen, and that is the economic collapse. This is why they've been demonizing China, because they know eventually they will be going to war with China, because they are a direct threat. They understand then Russia will join in. They understand that North Korea then will join in, and this will become World War III. And this is their entire plan. So watch Syria right now, and I've been reporting on this quite a bit. And if you go back a couple of months to my reports, I mentioned something about CNN reporting about they had intel about Assad having chemical weapons. I did a report telling them that they're developing biological weapons, and just recently it all of a sudden broke that that they have hidden chemical and biological weapons, because they're building up the propaganda right now, because they do not know how much longer they can hold the system together, and this is why they need the next event, and this is why they're doing all this. Now, let's move on to Obamacare right now. Now, we understand, and if people who've been following me, you understand how I feel about Obamacare. I do not like it. I don't think it's for the people. I am not Republican, Democrat. I am just for the people. If it's good for the people, it's good for me, and that's how I feel. I don't feel Obamacare is good for anybody. I believe this was for the insurance company. This was used to create revenue for the government and to not give anyone anything that they actually want. It's actually to bleed the American people of their money. And this is all this is, because the U.S. government cannot pay for the debt right now. It's unsustainable. They cannot do it. They do not have their tax revenue at this point, and this is why they're going all across the world using FACTA and having other banks turn in people who have accounts there. If you have dual citizenship, you'll now have to pay taxes, even if you do not work in the U.S. If there's a bill, if you try to leave the country, they want to take about 30% of your wealth. So we can see what is happening here. They're desperate right now to get as much revenue as possible, and they thought Obamacare was going to be the answer, because I just saw a report that they were supposedly going to bring in about $16 billion, $8 billion for the insurance companies, $8 billion worth of revenue into the government, but that has been pretty much falling apart at this time, and we understand that people are not signing up. Companies do not want it. They are laying off. They're limiting the amount of time that people work. They're turning full-time into part-time, and those part-time people, they're limiting the amount of hours. And of course, the Congressional Budget Office first predicted that an estimated about 800,000 Americans would drop out of the labor force because of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it. Now they revised that, and now they're saying it's about 2.3 million. Well, why don't we just double that number right now? It's going to be about 4.6 million, because they're always off, and they're always lowballing this, because companies have already made the move. Forever 21, Home Depot, and many other companies have already said, listen, we are not paying for health insurance. You can go to the exchange. We'll pay for the employees who are working full-time, but we are cutting hours so we don't have to get involved with Obamacare. And many of the companies, if you are working, will pay for the employee, and the spouse can go to the exchanges. So this is a no-win situation for the people. And again, you have to remember, if you do not take the insurance, what happens? You are penalized. There are taxes intertwined in Obamacare, and you will be paying more and more taxes because this is a cash grab. They need the revenue. And right now, what they thought was going to happen is not happening. They will not be getting the revenue, and they are running into problems with this. Now, we have to remember that they understand that the collapse is definitely coming. They know this. They're just trying to push this off a little bit further, and because they need time to disarm the American people. They need time to get all the local enforcement under DHS, following the orders of DHS. And we see this. We see what's happening. We see they're giving them local law enforcement tanks in these little communities. What do they need them for? We can see they're dressing them up in military garb, giving them assault rifles instead of just shotguns and pistols. They don't need any of this stuff. The only reason they need it is to completely be with DHS, to be in compliance, and this is what is happening right now. And they understand, since the collapse is coming, they need some time right now to get everything ready. And one of the biggest things is they're trying to get as many weapons off the street as possible, especially in those areas that are very dense, where there is a huge population. And this is why, if you look at all the states and the cities, they have implemented draconian gun laws. New York, California, Illinois, Colorado, Maryland, New Jersey. You can see what is happening here. They're trying to get to those places where they need to really cut down on what people have, because the amount of the population is so large there, it will be very difficult to control the people in these areas. And this is why, like, New York created the SAFE Act, which is like the Dianne Feinstein gun bill, where it limited the amount of bullets in the magazine. And right now, law enforcement officers really are not following this law. They're saying it's unconstitutional, and they don't believe that this law should be in effect. Many of the people there are saying, you know what, I'm not registering my gun, I'm not turning it in, I'm not telling you about it, and we're seeing a little bit of a backlash. And what they're really trying to do is they're trying to limit the people purchasing it right now, and hopefully they like to get at least 80% of the people just to come in and turn them in. And they're even proposing a firearm insurance, liability insurance, to put on a weapon. So when you buy a weapon now, you also have to take out $3 to $5 million worth of liability insurance. They're trying to make it so hard to get a weapon at this time, and this is all planned right now because they need to disarm the American people. But again, in New York, 62 counties and a total of 52 counties have already passed resolutions opposing the SAFE Act. And again, if this doesn't work, the president will take it to the next level. They're going to try another type of mass shooting. It will be horrific. We'll know it is the one because the president will come right on the news talking about gun control. If this doesn't work and doesn't get the gun bill and the UN Arms Treaty passed, he was going to try it. He's going to try to use executive orders to get this law passed, and that's what he's going to try to do next. Now, we understand in Thailand, Ukraine, the central bankers, the U.S. government, especially in Thailand, they have the puppet government. The people are protesting. They do not believe in the voting system they have now, and they're protesting against it. And there were very low turnout in the voting process in Thailand. But again, the Western nation and the government of Thailand is saying that, you know, that everything is perfect, and Western backers are claiming victory for the embattled dictatorship, and they believe that this election was good. But what we really know is no one really voted. It is not a free election. It is completely controlled because they do not want to lose the puppet regime. Now, if you look at the Ukraine, it's completely the opposite. They're trying to remove the government in the Ukraine and put a puppet regime in there. And this is why they have the protesters rioting, throwing bombs, and really causing havoc there, because they want to get into the Ukraine. It is a strategic location. It borders against Russia. They want Ukraine to join NATO. It borders along the Black Sea, and they are trying to push the agenda further. And this is what we're seeing right now. Now, we understand that the U.S. is losing ground in Iraq, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and right now in Iraq, what they are doing, they brought the U.S. soldiers in there to train the Iraqis, and the Iraqis and the Americans are purchasing paid mercenaries and private contractors to start off with. Now, we see the same thing in Syria. They have a paid mercenary group, which are the rebels in Syria that fight against Assad, and they pay these people to fight. The same thing's happening here, but it's on the opposite side. They are paying contractors to do the fighting, so they can always say, oh wait, the U.S. is not fighting there. These are paid contractors, and we're just training everyone. That's all we're doing. And we can see they need to do this. And you have to remember, Iraq just received orders for the Apache helicopters, and they are building up the force right now to push the rebels back who want their country back. And this is what's happening right now. Now, in Europe, we understand there is a missile shield. We understand that they are preparing and moving military assets to strategic locations. And the newest military assets are now tanks. Newest American tanks arrived at the American military base in Bavaria on January 31st. 29 heavy new generation Abrams tanks would be part of the European activity set. And of course, they sent 29 of these tanks there. They're just for training, but from the past history and what we know, they sent they sent military assets to Jordan to train there, and of course all that stayed in Jordan prior to the false flag event in Syria in August. The same thing is happening here. They are moving the military assets into Europe, and they're calling it, of course, for training, but it's not really for training. They're going to keep it there because they understand once the war gets started, they'll have all their military assets in place. Now, Iran has been talking to Russia, and a top Iranian security official says Tehran is prepared to strengthen cooperation with Russia in all fields based on mutual interests. Efforts by certain countries to disrupt Iran-Russia relations should not be allowed to affect these ties, and the SNSC secretary said this. He said security cooperation will prepare the ground for enhanced ties between the two countries in various fields, including the economic sector. And we should just listen to that. They are looking to Russia to help with their economic sector. At the same time, the U.S. government, the central bankers, the IMF are looking at the banks of Iran, looking to set their interest rates, looking to put the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency to pay for the natural resources. So we can see what is happening here, and we're going to have to see how this plays out. And again, just look back at what they've been saying during these peace talks. They've always brought up, and I'm talking about the central bankers, the U.S. government, that they will use military action if this deal goes south, because nothing is set in stone yet. This has nothing to do with nuclear. This all has to do with the U.S. dollar. And if they can't get into the banks and do this, they will use some type of military strike. And of course, they are building the case where they'll be able to go into Iran, into Syria, and we can see how they are building this up right now. Now, the UN Council received some information from where we don't know that Iran could face new international scrutiny over a previous activities tied to a potential ingredient for initiating nuclear detonations. The International Atomic Energy Agency might discuss Iran's past work with polonium-210 as at a Saturday meeting with Iranian delegates. Now, polonium can be used for civil purposes like nuclear batteries, but can also be used for neutron source for nuclear weapons, and the UN would like to clarify this issue. So you can see what they're doing. They're laying the groundwork just in case they can't get what they want. And they've been doing this quite often because they keep on bringing up military strike. If they don't go along with the deal, they implemented new sanctions, and this is continually going on right now. And this report went on to say that the agency is keeping an eye on the matter, and its understanding would benefit from further clarification. Now, the United States central bankers are making it perfectly clear to every single nation, do not do business with Iran right now. U.S. officials said Tuesday that an interim deal with Iran that curbs its nuclear program in exchange for some relief from economic sanctions that have crippled its economy does not mean that Tehran is open for business. Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman and David Cohen, Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financing, acknowledged that European businessmen are rushing to Iran to prepare for the possibility that all sanctions will be lifted. And they're telling them right now, do not do business with Iran at this time, because the U.S. will continue to enforce existing sanctions even as some are being eased, and those who violate them will be targeted at this point because we are not set up. We do not have the natural resources being used with the U.S. dollar, and you cannot do business until we set this up. And if we can't set this up, we are building the propaganda to strike Iran. And this is what this is all about. This is why they continually provoke them, and this is why the Revolutionary Guard continually comes out saying that they have people throughout the U.S. They want them to say these things because when the deal goes south, they could say, look, he said they had lone wolves, they had Iranian operatives within the United States, and all of a sudden we have a certain event, and we can see what is happening. Now, they are building the propaganda with Assad, and I've discussed this in length, and they're going to continually build the propaganda with Assad because eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be an event where they need to go into Syria. And this is telling us right here what I'm going to discuss next of why they need to go in there, because they're making no headway with the rebels. And this has been going on for quite a while right now, I think since 2011 or so. Now, U.S. Intelligence Chief James Clapper testified before a U.S. House of Representatives Intelligence Committee on Tuesday that last year's agreement to eliminate Syria's chemical weapons left President Bashar al-Assad in a strengthened position. The prospects are right now that Assad is actually in a strengthened position than when we discussed this last year. Clapper also said Assad's government is likely to stay in power with the current state of fighting between the regime and rebel forces, and he foresees a kind of that this entire fighting is a complete stalemate where neither the regime nor the opposition can prevail. And they are telling you this right now. The fighting that is going on is going to go nowhere at this time, and they understand this. This is why they did the false flag back in August, because they realized it's time. It's time to strike. It's time to move into Syria. Nothing has changed. Their goal is exactly the same. They just needed to regroup and create a new plan. This is why you see the Syrian Electronic Army, and you see it in the news, them attacking everywhere on PayPal, eBay, Microsoft, CNN, and they are building the propaganda there. This is why you see the biological weapons, chemical weapons. They have reports that it is hidden in the Alawite communities, and the UN inspectors have no knowledge of this, but the American intelligence does have information on this. This is why you see before the Geneva II talks, the reports are coming out that he had something to do with war crimes. They're destroying villages, and you can see what they are building right now because they are ready and they are preparing for the event to strike into Syria. And they realize the only way to do this is to do it someplace in America, because this will wake up the American people. It will wake up Congress. And when this happens, they can say, listen, they struck the financial institution. We had reports of the Syrian Electronic Army going back, months now, and they finally did it. They hit the banking industry. They hit the stock market. This is why we've been seeing glitches in the NASDAQ and the Chicago Mercantile, and they are just preparing for what is coming. They also said that they have biological and chemical weapons hidden. We can see those being used here in the States, and they are just building this up, and when the time is right, they will do this, and this will allow the U.S. people to beg for war with Syria, and they will eventually get the entire war started, and this will spread because we have to remember Russia and China are backing Syria. Iran has a pact with Syria that they will help them if they are invaded. So we can see what is happening right now, and that gives them a direct line once they strike Syria to go into Iran, because Iran is going to join the fight. This is how this is going to play out. We can see them building, we can see what they're doing, and they are ready to move forward with this. And again, the whole reason for this is they think they can prop the US dollar up for a longer period of time, but the bigger reason is to get into China, because that is the biggest threat. This is where they want the war. This is why Japan has been moving military assets, trying to change their constitution. This is why the United States is moving their base on Japan so they can ship in more sophisticated weapons. We can see they've been setting this up. This is why it's called the pivot to Asia, because they're moving all the military assets in this region to get ready for World War III. Okay, now we understand that the Obamacare website is a complete disaster. Michelle Obama had her friend do it. They didn't code it right. It wasn't done correctly. There's so many flaws, security flaws in it. The taxpayers of the United States spent billions and billions of dollars on something that just does not work. And their fear has always been that your information was not safe, that this website can be hacked, could be cyber attacked, and the whole entire thing can come tumbling down. And right now, there is some fear out there from a former Soviet republic that inserted malicious code into the Obamacare site. U.S. intelligence is urging the Obama administration to check its new healthcare computer network for malicious software after learning that developers linked to the Belarus government helped produce the website, raising fresh concerns that private data posted by millions of Americans could be compromised. The U.S. Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, software was written in part in Belarus by software developers under state control, and that makes the software a potential target for cyber attacks. Cybersecurity officials said the concerns are compounded by an internal data hijacking incident last year involving Belarus, of course, and they are looking at this, and we understand this would be a perfect way out of this disaster, this disaster website for Obama, having Russia attack the website, bringing it down, completely destroying it, allowing the propaganda to go forward to blame Russia for cyber attacking. And this, we can see, is all in preparation for Obama to get rid of the website and to demonize Russia. It is perfect. They are completely setting this up, and we can see this moving forward. Now, there is a report out there saying that the U.S. is evaluating China's EMP threat. And this goes on to say that the growing EMP threat seems to escape the Obama administration, according to Rachel Ehrenfeld of the Washington-based American Center for Democracy. She pointed out that as far back as September 2002, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had warned that countries have placed ballistic missiles in ships such as cargo, commercial ships all over the world. At any given time, Rumsfeld said, There's any number of ships off our coast coming and going on transporter erector launchers, and they simply erect it, fire off the ballistic missile, put it down, cover it up. Their radar signatures not any different than the 50 others in close proximity. So what they're saying is that any cargo ship coming in off the coast of the U.S. could have a ballistic missile. There could be a launcher inside. They could raise the launcher, shoot off a ballistic missile, and explode it over the United States, which would cause an EMP effect. And this is what Rumsfeld said back in 2002. And it's amazing how these things always come up later on and then they actually end up happening. But this goes on to say that Cooper has contended that the North Koreans tend to undertake missile tests using a south polar orbit against the U.S., does not have a missile defense, especially if the missile has an EMP nuclear device called a super EMP, which North Korea is thought to be developing. So this report is telling us that the Obama administration is not looking at any type of EMP attack, and going back as far as 2002, back to Rumsfeld, they are stating that this could be possible to bring down the power grid and knock out our electronics. So, we can see what is happening here. The propaganda is being built up over and over, demonizing North Korea, demonizing China, and this is going forward and on and on and on as time goes on, because we understand all those countries that do not have a private Western central bank, which are a threat to the U.S. government and the central bankers, are the enemy, and this is why they continually demonize these countries. Okay, now the FBI is conducting interviews in the U.S. with people from the Caucasus, and we understand there's a very small community of people from the Caucasus in the United States, but the FBI is trying to find information, if they've heard anything about any type of terrorist threats, because they're worried if something does happen in Sochi Olympics, something might occur here. And again, this is all part of the agenda to demonize Russia, actually to demonize all those countries that do not have a private Western central bank, because any country that does not have a private Western central bank is the enemy of the central bankers and the U.S. government. And this is why you see all the information coming out from the cyber attacks from China, from North Korea, from Syria, from Russia, and this is why they build this propaganda up, because eventually, when the war gets started, these are the countries that people will say, oh yeah, I understand that. I remember hearing about this, and they're the ones who attacked us. Listen, everyone, we know things are in the works. We understand that some things are coming down the pike. We understand that they are building up the propaganda with Syria to strike Syria to get the war started, and what we need to do is be ready for this collapse. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.